Welcome to the Deep Dive. We unpack complex topics aiming for, clarity and insight. Today, we're exploring one of humanity's really deep longings, this desire for profound connection, for meaning, especially in our spiritual lives. And often this search leads to some pretty unexpected, really rich traditions within Christianity.
Exactly. It's that inherent human drive, isn't it? For something more, that restless heart looking for ultimate satisfaction.
Yeah.
And, spirituality often gives us the language for that deep, urgent desire for God.
So what's our mission for this deep dive? We're taking a journey into something called bridal mysticism.
Mm-hmm.
It's a deeply intimate Christian tradition, seeing the soul's relationship with God as a kind of, marriage.
Mm-hmm.
We'll look at its ancient roots, how the Carmelite order really championed it, and importantly for listeners, whether this apparently feminine idea is actually for everyone, including men, within the Catholic faith.
Right. And the goal here is to give you a sort of shortcut to understanding this powerful path to intimacy with God. This exploration should offer some insights into human desire, divine love, stuff that might genuinely surprise you. It's about a tradition that insists on a transformative personal encounter.
Okay, let's dive in. When we talk about bridal mysticism, what fundamentally are we defining? What's the core concept?
Well, at its heart, bridal mysticism is this theological framework. It understands the individual soul's relationship with God using the metaphor of a bride and a bridegroom.
A bride and bridegroom.
Yeah, it's a really personal, deeply intimate way to talk about the most profound union possible with God in this life.
And this isn't some newfangled idea, right?
Yeah.
You mentioned ancient roots
Yeah.
back in Scripture
Yeah.
itself.
Oh, absolutely. Spousal imagery is, well, it's woven right into the Old and New Testaments. In the Old Testament, you've got prophets like Hosea, Jeremiah, Isaiah. They depict God, Yahweh, as the faithful husband. And Israel is the beloved, but, often the unfaithful bride. The book of Hosea really dramatizes this God's pained yet persistent love.
So initially, the bride was collective, Israel as a whole.
Exactly. It was the people of Israel.
And how did that carry over or change in the New Testament?
Well, it intensifies, really centering on Jesus Christ. Christ is identified as the bridegroom, and the church becomes his bride. You see this in Matthew 9:15. Jesus calls himself the bridegroom. Or Ephesians 5, where Paul directly compares the husband-wife bond to Christ's love for the church. It's quite explicit.
Right, that Ephesians passage is key.
Mm-hmm. And it all culminates in Revelation, doesn't it, with the vision of the marriage supper of the Lamb. So again, often the bride is still seen as the collective church, the community of believers.
Okay, so that leads to a crucial question. When did this big shift happen? When did the individual soul start being seen as the bride? That feels like a huge step in personalizing salvation.
It was genuinely revolutionary. And the key figure here, largely, is Origen of Alexandria, back in the 3rd century.
Origin, okay.
Through his commentaries, especially on the Song of Songs, that incredibly passionate love poem in the Bible, Origen did something daring. He interpreted the bride not just as the church, but also as the individual soul, the anima.
Individual soul.
Wow. Yes, the soul and its loving journey towards union with the divine word, the Logos, who is the bridegroom. This was just groundbreaking for emphasizing the interior life, the personal spiritual journey.
And was this applied to everyone back then, men and women? Was it sort of gender blind initially?
Initially, yes. You can look at St. Paul in 2 Corinthians, where he says, I have espoused you to one husband, that I may present you as a chaste virgin to Christ. That was understood to apply to all believers. But, over time, the metaphor did become more strongly associated with women, particularly consecrated virgins. It got intertwined with evolving ideas about gender roles within the church.
Interesting how that develops. Origen opens the door, who really takes this idea and makes it central to Western spirituality.
That would arguably be the great 12th century Cistercian abbot, St. Bernard of Clairvaux.
Bernard, right.
His series of sermons, 86 of them, on the Song of Songs became, just foundational. Almost all later mystics, including the Carmelites we'll get to, drew heavily on him. Bernard really emphasized credo et experir. I believe so that I may experience. He valued that contemplative experience.
And he wasn't afraid of using some pretty intense, passionate language, was he?
Not at all. His language is full of extraordinary tenderness, passion, describing the soul's union with the word. He speaks of a kiss, a mutual embrace, love responding to love. And he explicitly called this peak of contemplative prayer a spiritual marriage, a state of profound union. He really set the stage.
Okay, perfect transition. That brings us to the Carmelites. Why was the Carmelite order such fertile ground for this kind of intense, intimate bridal mysticism.
Well, the Carmelite order's whole spiritual path, right for its beginning, was aimed at one thing: direct, intimate union with the living God. That was the goal. Their core principles just created the perfect environment for this nuptial metaphor to be embraced, not just poetically, but as, the best language to describe what they were fundamentally about.
Tell us a bit more about those origins. How are they different?
Well, unlike orders founded for, say, preaching or teaching, the Carmelites started as a small group of lay hermits on Mount Carmel in the Holy Land, late 12th century.
Public Carmelites, right.
Yeah, they were seeking a life modeled on the early church simplicity, fervent prayer. Their rule, from St. Albert, emphasized solitude, silence, manual work, but above all, constant prayer, meditating day and night. The individual cell was like their personal desert, a space to encounter God directly without distraction.
So that focus on contemplation wasn't just part of their life, it was the point. That really sets them apart.
Absolutely. For Carmelites, contemplation and union with God are the proper end, their highest purpose. Everything else serves that. It requires radical detachment, this sort of call to the wilderness where God can speak intimately to the heart. The motto linked to Elijah, their spiritual father. With zeal have I been zealous for the Lord God of hosts, for I stand in his presence. That captures it. Just this profound thirst to be with God.
And they had those two key spiritual figures guiding them, Elijah and Mary.
Yes, exactly. Elijah is the model contemplative, finding God in that sound of a gentle breeze after intense purification. It balances deep interiority with potentially prophetic action flowing from that prayer.
And Mary,
Huh?
Our Lady of Mount Carmel. She seems like the perfect embodiment of their ideal.
Oh, absolutely. She's the mother, the patroness, the ideal of the pure contemplative soul. Mary embodies perfect receptivity to God, that life of silent, loving union. Remember how Luke says she kept all these things, pondering them in her heart? In that, she's the archetypal bride of Christ, the model for every Carmelite soul wanting to be a dwelling place for God's word. This whole framework just cried out for the language of supreme intimacy, which bridal mysticism provides.
Which leads us straight to the great Carmelite mystics who really defined this spiritual marriage. St. Teresa of Avila and St. John of the Cross. Teresa first, she's often called the architect.
Yes, St. Teresa of Avila really systematized it. She created this incredibly insightful spiritual map. Her masterpiece, The Interior Castle, describes the soul as this diamond castle with different rooms or mansions.
Right, the mansions.
Leading inwards to the center where Christ dwells. It's a profound guide to the cycle journey towards union.
And she outlined clear stages in that journey, from the beginning right up to this ultimate spiritual marriage.
She did. There are 7 mansions, but you can think of roughly 3 phases. The early ones involve the soul's own effort fighting sin, starting to pray. Then, as you go deeper, God's action takes over more. Things like the prayer of quiet, the prayer of union start happening. She uses that amazing analogy of the silkworm.
Oh yeah, tell us about that.
The soul is like a silkworm, diligently spinning its cocoon through prayer and virtue. Then it has to die to its old self, its attachments. And from that death, it emerges transformed, like a little white butterfly ready for a higher form of union. It's about total transformation.
A powerful image. So that transformation precedes the really deep stages. Then comes what she called spiritual betrothal, Mansion 6.
Exactly. Spiritual betrothal is this profound union, but it's still intermittent. It's often marked by intense divine gifts, maybe locutions, visions, raptures, and the famous wound of love. Teresa experienced this herself, the transverberation, where she felt an angel pierce her heart with a fiery spear. Bernini's sculpture captures that intensity.
Right, that ecstatic pain.
Yes. It leaves the soul blissful, but also in deep longing. But like an engagement, it's not yet the final permanent state. There are fluctuations, intense presence, then maybe painful absence.
And the peak, the 7th mansion, is spiritual marriage. How is that different from betrothal? What makes it the ultimate?
It's qualitatively different. It's permanent, indissoluble. If betrothal involves visits from the bridegroom, marriage means he moves in permanently. Teresa uses these vivid images, rain falling into a river, you can't separate the waters anymore. Or light coming through 2 windows, merging into one single brightness. The result is this deep, abiding peace, an almost constant sense of God's presence. The soul is fundamentally transformed, participating in God's own life.
What's really striking is her language. She uses very effective, almost, erotic language to describe this.
She really does, and that was bold. She uses phrases like caressing of love, talks about fulfilling the dream of any adolescent's heart. Her conviction was that human passionate love, eros, was created by God precisely to find its ultimate fulfillment in him, the true bridegroom. For her, spiritual marriage was the absolute pinnacle, this permanent transforming state.
But it wasn't just about mystical feelings for her, was it? She connected it to action.
Absolute critical point. Teresa always insisted, love is proved by deeds. This profound union wasn't meant to be navel-gazing. It had to overflow into practical charity, into service for the church. She said the marriage produces streams of milk to nourish others.
So if Teresa drew the map, St. John of the Cross, her contemporary and collaborator, provided the theological depth, explaining the why behind the journey.
Exactly. John complements Teresa's experiential account with this rigorous theological and poetic exploration of why the soul needs such deep purification to reach union. And his main way of expressing this was through poetry, breathtaking poetry, much of it written while he was imprisoned by his own brothers. His spiritual canticle is basically a retelling of the Song of Songs, but it's the bride's soul searching for Christ, the bridegroom.
And central to his teaching is this idea of the dark night. It sounds quite daunting.
It does, and it can be. But it's essential in his view. His core idea is stark. God is all, and the creature is nothing. Union isn't about adding things to ourselves, it's about subtracting, emptying the self of everything that isn't God. The dark night is this intense purification process, often painful. God himself purges the soul at its very roots, senses, spirit, intellect, will. This can lead to feelings of abandonment, darkness, unworthiness.
Which sounds like God is absent, but you're saying it's the opposite.
Counterintuitively, yes. It's often God's intense, purifying presence that feels like darkness to our limited, unpurified faculties. It's part of the apophatic path, knowing God through unknowing, because he transcends all our concepts.
So John also talks about betrothal and marriage, maybe with finer theological distinctions.
He does. For John, spiritual betrothal involves these loving visits. It's a real union, but it's intermittent, and the lower parts of the soul might still be troubled. He uses the image of two candles. When you touch them, the flame becomes one, but the candles themselves are still distinct.
Okay.
Spiritual marriage or transforming union is different. It's permanent, stable, complete. The beloved never leaves the soul, he says. The union is so total that the soul and God seem to share one life. They become one unified brightness, fused together.
And in his work, The Living Flame of Love, he describes the soul becoming a living flame. What does that feel like?
That describes the state in the transforming union. The soul, now totally purified and ablaze with divine love, becomes love. It's a living flame. It's enjoying a genuine foretaste of heaven, of the beatific vision. He says only a thin veil separates the soul from seeing God face to face. It's heaven on earth, in a sense.
Amazing. And this powerful tradition didn't end there. It continued into the 19th century with St. Therese of Lisieux, the Little Flower. How did she fit into this?
Therese absolutely absorbed this tradition. She internalized it within her famous little way of spiritual childhood, confidence, and love. She described her first Holy Communion as her first kiss of Jesus, a fusion. She used language very similar to Teresa's. Therese had disappeared like a drop of water lost in the immensity of the ocean.
Wow, that direct echo.
Right. Her whole identity was deeply wrapped up in being a bride of Christ. It fueled her love for the Eucharist, her desire to suffer with Christ. She even offered herself as a victim of love to his merciful love and saw her final illness, tuberculosis, as her wedding feast, preparing her for eternal union.
So if we try to pull it all together, what are the core themes we see running through Carmelite bridal mysticism from Teresa and John to Therese?
Okay, key themes. First, transforming union. The ultimate goal is the soul being made one with God, becoming divine by participation. Second, there's a clear progression, stages moving from courtship toward permanent marriage. Third, the driving force is intense love and desire, a purified eros directed wholly towards God, a mutual wanting. Fourth, purification and the cross are non-negotiable. Suffering is part of the path, conforming the soul to the crucified bridegroom, love until death. And finally, it's never just individualistic. It always has ecclesial and Marian dimensions. It's for the good of the church, and Mary is the perfect model of that receptive bridal soul.
That paints such a rich, profound picture of intimacy with God. But it does bring us to that final, crucial segment, maybe the trickiest part for modern listeners, especially Catholic men. The soul has no gender. How does a man engage with the tradition that consistently casts the soul as the bride? That language can feel like a barrier.
It's a really important question, and one that comes up a lot. The key is understanding the symbolism. Masculine and feminine here aren't about biology. In this spiritual dynamic, God is always the initiator, the giver, the pursuer, symbolically masculine, the bridegroom. The human soul, whether in a man or a woman, its fundamental posture before God has to be one of receptivity, responsiveness, surrender, symbolically feminine. The soul doesn't seize union, it receives God's gift of himself.
So the great male mystics within this tradition, they actually embrace this bride role symbolically.
Absolutely. Think back to St. Bernard of Clairvaux, a powerful abbot writing profoundly from the perspective of the bride longing for the bridegroom. And even more strikingly, St. John of the Cross, a man. His entire spiritual canticle is voiced by the female bride searching for her male beloved. He consistently uses she for the soul in that context. It underlines the symbolic nature. He even advised souls, all souls, take God for your bridegroom and friend and walk with him continually.
That really drives home the symbolic point. So for someone today, maybe a man finding the bride language difficult, what's a helpful way to interpret it?
A really useful lens is seeing the bride as an allegory for the heart's deepest desires. She embodies that profound incompleteness we all feel, that restless heart Augustine talked about, that urgent longing for ultimate satisfaction. These are universal human experiences. A man can absolutely identify with the bride's restlessness, her single-minded pursuit of the beloved, seeing that as a movement within his own spirit towards God. It's about owning that deep spiritual yearning, that holy eros.
So the aim isn't trying to emulate being female. It's about achieving that total union.
Precisely. The goal is union with God, loving him with all your heart, soul, strength, mind, emotions. The nuptial imagery is a powerful tool, a language, to express the totality of that self-gift, that complete surrender and receiving of God's love. It's an invitation to every single person.
And male Carmelites today, the friars, how do they relate to this?
They are steeped in it. While obviously friars don't have a literal marriage ceremony to Christ like nuns might in their profession, they are deeply formed by John of the Cross and Teresa. They absolutely seek that transforming union. You have figures like Blessed Father Marie Eugene of the Child Jesus, a modern Carmelite, who freely spoke of mystical marriage as the spiritual summit for everyone. And think of St. Titus Brandsma, the Dutch Carmelite friar martyred by the Nazis. In his prison diary, facing death, he wrote, "Jesus, when I'm with you, I feel as if I, too, am your bride."
Wow, even in that extremity.
Yes. He called his impending martyrdom his wedding feast. It's a stunning testament to how deeply ingrained and universal this bridal understanding of ultimate union is within the Carmelite spirit, transcending biological sex.
It's truly fascinating how this entire tradition, stretching back millennia, insists on such a personal, intimate, experiential relationship with God. It really speaks to those deep human hungers you mentioned.
And that's its enduring power, I think. It offers a path beyond a faith that's just intellectual belief or rule following. The Carmelite mystics insist that direct, living contact with God isn't just for a select few. It's the potential fulfillment of the grace we all receive in baptism. It's a taste of heaven now.
Of course, like any powerful idea, it can be misunderstood. Sometimes you hear critiques about it being overly sentimentalized, focusing just on feelings without the hard work.
That's a valid concern if one aspect gets isolated, if it becomes just Misty Chick's theology without the rigor. But the authentic Carmelite tradition, especially in Teresa and John, holds both poles fiercely together. The demanding purification, the self-denial, the suffering of the dark night, the death to self, these are never ignored, but they're not the goal. They are the necessary path towards the ecstatic, unitive love of the spiritual marriage. It's always both, the cross and the bridal chamber.
So wrapping this up, what does this incredibly rich tradition offer you, our listener, as you think about your own spiritual path?
Well, this deep dive into Carmelite bridal mysticism really invites you to consider your own deepest desires. What are you truly longing for? It suggests that maybe the most intense, passionate dynamics we experience in human love are actually echoes, reflections of the ultimate archetype. The love relationship between God and your own soul, a relationship eternally yearning for deeper union.
So after exploring all this, what stands out most to you? And maybe more importantly, how might this ancient, incredibly intimate vision of love between the soul and God connect with the deepest desires stirring within your own heart?